Good morning. Bob was a worrier. He worried about anything and everything, and he was kind of a drag to be around because he was so negative. So his neighbor came out one morning, and he saw Bob across the street whistling as he was raking the leaves in his yard, and he thought, there's something wrong with Bob. He looks way too happy. And so he went over and he said, Bob, what happened? Bob said, I don't have to worry anymore. His neighbor said, what do you mean you don't have to worry anymore? And Bob said, I have hired someone to do all my worrying for me. And Bob said, his neighbor said, how much are you paying this person to worry for you? And Bob said, $1,000 a week. And he said, $1,000 a week? How in the world can you afford $1,000 a week? And Bob said, I can't, but that's for him to worry about. I can hear my earring. Can y'all hear my earring? Yeah, hold on. I'll just be one earring, at least. Don't judge me for that. Wouldn't it be great if we could just pay someone to do our worrying for us? Our text this morning lands us right in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount, one of the most well-known teachings of Jesus. Thank you, Troy, for reading it for us this morning. I appreciate that. You'll probably notice in your Bible that the passage right before his teachings about worry is actually included in this passage today. And I think the lectionary includes it that way for a reason, because he's doing a sermon, so it all kind of goes together. So it makes a little more sense when you kind of put it all together. And you'll see, I think, why it kind of goes together. So the passage begins by Jesus saying, you can't have two masters. You can't love God and also love money. Don't head for the back door. This is not a stewardship sermon. I will let Glenn handle that. I actually don't think that this has a whole lot to do with money. I think he's not telling us, sell your possessions, go live in the desert, God will take care of you. Though there are some that have taken it that way. I don't think he's saying, stop contributing to your 401k. I've got you. I'll take care of you. I don't think he's saying, you don't need to worry about long-term medical care. We'll take care of you. I don't think he's saying that. I don't think he intends for us to just mooch off the system in the guise of God taking care of us. I don't think he means for us to just be reliant on other people for our basic needs. Instead, I think that he's calling us away from excess worry and angst that keeps us separate from God. He draws contrast to the Gentiles, and in some translations he says pagans, and in some he says Gentiles. The point is not that he's trying to trash this whole group of people. The point is that his listeners are living amongst this other group of people. So it's a very real contrast to them. They're going to understand what he's saying when he says, look at this group of people. So the Gentiles valued possessions, self-worth, money, power, social status. Those are the things that were important to them. And I think Jesus is saying, that's fine for them. But you're not them. This is what I want you to do. He's drawing a different moral compass for them. He's saying, look at them. I really want the opposite out of you. Those things are all fleeting, but the kingdom is forever. He's introducing a different way of living. He wants us to turn to our master and reminds us that money is not it. And there we see it right at the beginning of the next section. You can't miss the words. He says, do not worry. Now, this kind of command is not really Jesus' style. Most of his teachings come by way of parables. And we read the text, and we, the listener, are interpreting what the story means and what his meaning is behind it. But he's very direct here, and it's almost a command. Do not worry. Worry is something we all do. Even children worry. Some of us rarely worry about things, but some of us could make it into an Olympic sport. How many of you have ever realized, oh, I'm not worried about something. I must have missed something. So then you get worried that you've missed something that you're supposed to be worried about. And you start in this cycle of trying to come up with all the things that you're worried about. we're kind of uncomfortable in that peaceful place, so we start to create and seek out new things to worry about. Worry is kind of like a rocking chair. It really gives us something to do, but it doesn't get us anywhere. I want to be clear when I'm speaking about worry, and I know when Jesus is speaking about worry, we're not talking about anxiety. We kind of interchange anxiety and worry in conversation, but the reality is that anxiety is a really serious medical concern. And as much as 18% of the U.S. population struggle with diagnosed anxiety. So I know that some of you are coming from that place, and I want you to hear me that I'm not saying that you have anxiety because you don't love God enough. That's not the case. They're two separate things. I also think that there's a difference between worry and concern. If you see your children playing in traffic and you're not concerned, I'm concerned for you. And if your doctor says you really have high blood pressure, you need to take steps to lower it, and you're not concerned, there's an issue. Because those are things that you can do something about, and you should do something about them. But worry is when you can't do anything about the situation, but you also don't want to hand it over to God. I chose this text because I think this is the time of year when we struggle the most with this. Marketing departments everywhere have really tried their hardest at selling us on this magical and enchanting time of Christmas, full of rainbows and butterflies and gingerbread lattes, and we think it's just amazing. But the reality is it's really hard for some of us. It's really hard. Even if we're one of the lucky ones who's not trying to navigate difficult family dynamics in this 5-week period of family obligations, we have other things on our list to worry about. We're worried about our schedule is way overbooked. We're looking at that bank account wondering how we're going to fill our Christmas list. Will my mother-in-law like my food? Will my boss give me that Christmas bonus that, let's face it, we've already spent? Amazon can't get that big gift here, and my child's going to be crushed. The season brings with it a change of pace. It can be kind of nice, but it also can be really worrisome for many of us. Soon after Jesus gives this direction, he starts talking about the birds. And he says that birds don't sow, they don't reap, they don't store up food and grain, but God still feeds them. Now, if they were humans, we would call them lazy, entitled, and know how to work the system. And I would say that some of the birds at the beach do know how to work the system. But birds really are not lazy, and they're not entitled, and they really are not working the system. The point is that birds aren't meant for that kind of work. They cannot plow fields. They cannot water plants. They cannot store up grain. It's not what they were created to do. It's not what they were created to be. But if they remain in their natural state of existence, God provides for them. Jesus also talks about the lilies of the field. He says they don't need to toil or spin to be beautiful. They just need to be. When they're in their created existence, they flourish. It's only when we try and take them and make them into something that they were not created to be, they wither and die. So what does that mean for us? We all have a natural state of existence. We were all on earth not to generate our lives. We're on earth to receive our lives from God. Perhaps Jesus is saying, if we stay within that existence of being the creation and not the creator, maybe we'll be free of worry. Sure, we think we generate our lives. It's the American way. We can figuratively plow the fields, water the plants, store up the grain. But the reality is we can't force the rain to come, and we can't force that plant to grow, and we cannot stop that hurricane from plowing through our property. We cannot control it. Most of what is essential to our very existence was given to us. We received it. We're the creation, and He is the creator. If we live in that natural state of existence, we might find that the world is full of grace and the overflowing love of God. There's a poem by Wendell Berry that I think speaks really well to this. Some of you are probably familiar with it, called The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. And for a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Could there be freedom in knowing that God knew what he was doing when he created us with certain limitations? We can't control it all. It's exhausting. And worry comes when we try to control what is beyond our control. So existing within that space that God created for you to exist is not intended to limit you. It's intended to free you. Lying awake at night worrying about whether you're going to have cancer is not going to prevent you from having cancer. But it could give you stomach ulcers, high blood pressure, sleeplessness, moodiness, weight gain, all those physical side effects of worry that we are familiar with. How many of us know someone who died of a heart attack and they just stressed themselves until their body just said, I can't do it anymore? But perhaps more than that, there's spiritual consequences. What does our daily walk with God look like when there are things that we refuse to turn over to him? What does our relationship look like when we don't trust him enough to rest in his grace? Fog can blanket a city 7 blocks wide and as much as 100 feet deep. But if you take all that fog and you convert it into water, it only fills a single glass. Worry is like this gigantic fog that keeps us from seeing God. But when we look at it for what it really is, it's nothing more than a mere glass of water. These kind of stories kind of give me some peace, because it reminds me that even the people who literally were walking alongside Jesus still worried. They still worried. Humans have always worried. It also reminds me of just how relevant our scripture still is today. The thing is, we don't have the power to extend our life another day. We can't grow taller, we can't change the color of our skin, and we cannot force our mother-in-law to like our food. We just can't. But we can come into the peace of wild things and rest in the grace of the world anytime we become content with just being a human being and stop trying to be God. Towards the end of our text, Jesus says, each day has enough trouble of its own. I really love this kind of snippet of the text because it reminds us to not get caught in the then pattern. You know, once I get that promotion, then I'll have enough money to be happy. Once I get married, then I'll never be sad again. Once I retire, then I'll be relaxed. Those things are really great, but you're putting your happiness off for a future instead of using the gift that you've been given today. Tomorrow's going to have its challenges, so face those tomorrow. Don't carry those burdens with you into the future. You're not made to carry that kind of burden. I love looking at creation kind of as a way to see how God kind of envisioned our lives to be. And he created a unit of time for us to live within, in that a sun up and a sundown every single day. And all of creation, if you think about it, lives within these parameters. Our bodies force us to sleep at the end of that day. It's a unit of time that's been gifted to us by our Creator. So if we start to think each unit as its own and take each day of its own, maybe that's what he intended, for us to live each day in its order. Because worrying about tomorrow doesn't rob it of its sorrows. It just robs today of its strength. So why do you think we worry? I think Jesus gives some pretty clear explanations in this passage. I think there's really two options. You're either too big, you think you're too big, you think you're too good, you think you know it, you tell God, I got this. You want control over everything, you don't want him to have any control. Or you think you're too small. And you don't think you're worthy of living out this created purpose that has been given to you. Jesus just calls it a basic lack of faith. This inability to trust God means you miss out on the opportunity to live within this deep and rich and profound place of trust. We think we know better. We tell God that we've got this. We want to control all the things. Or we feel like we're not enough. We live like it's not okay, and it's not enough to just be who we are. And so we live out of this deep sense of insecurity. But you are enough. You were created enough. I think one of the biggest mistakes the evangelical church has made in recent years is we've spent so much time convincing people how awful they are. They're so broken, you're so sinful, you're so awful. God can't even stand to look at you because you're so full of sin. That's not the God that Jesus is really speaking about. Of course he wants to look at you. You are his creation. Of course he loves you. He made you in his image. Of course he thinks you are worthy of his love. Why would we think any different? Why would we think that we're not worthy of that? Jesus reminds us that God took care of the birds and the flowers, and aren't we more valuable than they? Have you ever thought about the fact that he created all these things? I mean, bajillions of things. But we are the most valuable of those? How awesome that is. His love for us is unending. We are enough, and we are worthy of his guidance and love. I want you to take a minute and think about something you've been worried about lately. Some of you may not have heard a word I've said because you've been consumed by it since I mentioned it at the beginning. What would it take for you to let it go? What would it take for you to hand it over to God and let him worry about it a while? What would it take for you to say to God, I know I'm used to piloting this thing, and I've pushed you away, but I know that you know me best, and I know that you have my back, and I know you want what's best for me, and I'm tired of trying to steer it my way. What would it take to give up control? Or what would it take to say to God, I feel so small and unworthy and broken. I feel unworthy of your love and your grace, but I need to trust in you. I have been created in your image. Help me look to you. I want you to close your eyes and listen to the words of Jesus again. This time from the contemporary English version of our text. You cannot be the slave of two masters. You will like one more than the other or be more loyal to one than the other. You cannot serve both God and money. I tell you not to worry about your life. Don't worry about having something to eat or drink or wear. Isn't life more than food or clothing? Look at the birds in the sky. They don't plant or harvest. They don't even store grain in barns. Yet your Father in heaven takes care of them. Aren't you worth more than birds? Can worry make you live longer? Why worry about clothes? Look how the wild flowers grow. They don't work hard to make their clothes. But I tell you that Solomon, with all his wealth, wasn't as well clothed as one of them. God gives such beauty to everything that grows in the fields, even though it's here today and thrown into the fire tomorrow. He will surely do even more for you. Why do you have such little faith? Don't worry and ask yourselves, will we have anything to eat? Will we have anything to drink? Will we have any clothes to wear? Only people who don't know God are always worrying about such things. Your Father in heaven knows that you need all these things. But more than anything else, put God's work first and do what He wants. Then the other things will be yours as well. Don't worry about tomorrow. It will take care of itself. You have enough to worry about today. Amen. As we go into this time of response, you are invited to come and kneel and pray at the altar. If you are looking for a church home and would like to join with us in community and mission and life together, you're also welcome to come down. Phil and I will be at the front to greet you.